All right. Okay, let's get started. Welcome back to another Lunch and Learn with the RPA. My name is Marcus Auerbach. I'm a board member of the RPA, have been volunteering here for a few years. And if you don't know me, I'm also a real estate investor. I've been investing in Milwaukee for 15 years, mostly single family homes. I'm also the owner of On Point Realty with Keller Williams. So we're a small real estate team with Keller Williams, and I host a YouTube channel about Milwaukee real estate. That's about me. Today we're talking about what's going on in August in 2024 in the Milwaukee real estate market. Take a quick look at the numbers, and then our topic for today is property upgrades for higher rents and better tenants. As always, let me know if you have questions. Would love to make this as interactive as possible. And to get started, let me just zap through the latest numbers here. So as always, these are from MLS. July 2024 inventory is up 30%. We came from extremely low inventory. So we're very happy to see more inventory. This is now a trend. We've been seeing this for the last 3 months now. But if you look below in July 2019, so before COVID, we had about twice as much inventory. And if you go back all the way to July 2015, we had over 13,000. And just for cheeks and giggles, if you were to go back to when I started in real estate, that was in 2008, we had over 18,000 units on the market. So yeah, we went from under 3,000 to over 3,000, so we're happy to have that extra inventory, but still not a whole lot that we have. Closed sales are very, very slow, just over 2,000 units. That has become a thing, so the market is very, very compressed, and it's not for a lack of demand. There's just fewer transactions, just because we don't have the inventory. And it's just a very, very competitive market. We would normally expect somewhere around a little over 3,000 units a month. Days on market is inching up. So that was a surprise when I saw that. We've been, over the last years, in the summer month, very stable at an average of 5 days on market. And July came in at 6, so that was a surprise. Actually, I put the data here wrong. It's actually 6 days on market. And, looking back 11 days, 50 days, you remember when it took half a year to sell a house. So we're still extremely fast paced, but there is a very, very faint slowdown that we have been seeing in the market in the last few weeks. Median prices with that are up 355,000. That jumped a bit. We're now at 11%. June numbers were a little bit lower because last year, June was extremely high. So it always depends a little bit on what the month we're comparing it to was. But on average, year to date, we're looking at around 7.5%, 8%. Specifically for July, we're looking at a plus 11%. And as I always like to mention, if you look back July 2015, we basically have doubled prices in the last 9 years here in Milwaukee. So continuing seeing strong appreciation. With other market trends that we're seeing, buyers have become a little bit pickier across all market segments. We've started seeing that late June, definitely in July. The entry-level market has powered right through the summer holiday season. July is always a little bit of a slower market. We're coming off the spring market. And the entry-level segment has not seen any of that slowdown. So entry-level is up to about $350,000, $400,000. That's where most first-time home buyers are. And that market has remained very, very competitive. But we have seen the typical slowdown in the medium and in the luxury price segment. And that's coming back up now for the usual second run that we see in the market in late August, September, and then into October. Let's take a quick look at inventory. Here's a visual of the last 12 months single family inventory in Milwaukee. You can see here active listings. So we're really trending up here nicely, and we're finally over where we were last year. And it's a relatively stable trend. If I overlay that here with the green line, the blue line is total inventory. The green line is new inventory that's coming on the market. So first of all, the two lines are very close together, which is basically telling you that almost everything that comes on the market in 1 month is being sold in the next month. But look at that incline that we're seeing here. get my laser pointer here. Look at that incline. So we're seeing a steady growth of new inventory. Of course, there's a seasonal peak in May, but we are holding stable now in June and July with a steady supply of inventory. And when I ask my service providers, photographers, stagers, they are all very well booked for August and for September. So that is telling me that we're going to have an influx of inventory continued also in the next month. We are working on several listings that are going to be live here as well in the next few weeks. What's going on with competitiveness? That is starting to ease a little bit. So we are still deep in the red territory. If you're not familiar with this metric, this is a list to sold ratio. So we're basically looking at all the transactions that have closed, and we are calculating what is the ratio of what sellers were asking and what buyers ultimately ended up paying for the properties. So historically, that's around 95, 96%. So people are historically able to negotiate a little bit down from the list price. We have abandoned this type of market during the COVID years, and with every single year we have been over 100%. We have seen in some years as high as 103%, a little over. Now we're in the 102 range, and we're coming down a little bit from that, 101.8 now. So on average, people have paid 1.8% over list price. And of course, that means in the hot markets in like West Allis, in Wauwatosa, on the North Shore, we have seen a lot of deals that went 5 to 10% over list price. But on average, we are at 101.8. So the competitiveness is coming down a little bit from the high that we have seen during the spring market. It's getting a little better, but still relatively competitive market. More information on my YouTube channel. And with that, we are heading to the topic of higher rents with property upgrades. And I want to start getting into a little thought mode here by asking the question, how much does it cost you to generate an additional $1,000 in rent revenue? So, obviously this is typically by, buying more units. How much do you spend typically for a unit? I'll give you a second here to think how much that is on average. I have 4 options here to choose from. What do you spend on real estate in order to generate a typical $1,000 rent revenue? $75,000, $100,000, $125,000, maybe $150,000. And if I'm lucky, some of you will give me some answers here where they think they are. Where do you think you're typically coming out? What are you spending typically to generate $1,000 in rental revenue? Any thoughts on that? Gina says 100 to 125, and Alexandra says 100,000. Yeah, that sounds about right. Mike 75. Okay, that's pretty aggressive. Yeah, I'm more on the top end. I'm more like with single families in the suburbs. We are definitely higher there. So it depends a little bit on what your overall investment strategy is. But no matter what the number is, you are spending a significant amount of money in order to get $1,000 in additional rent revenue. So now the next question that I have for you is, what would it take in upgrades? Jenny's saying far less, but I'm not doing this in the usual way. Well, that is awesome, and we would like to learn more. Maybe we can get back to the Jen in just a minute. So you have basically 2 questions, 2 possibilities how you can grow rent revenue. One is by buying more units, and the other one is by increasing rents. Part of that is organic increase in rents. We have seen this year very strong rent increases. We spoke about this earlier this year, and I showed you the data, and this is probably going to continue. But the other way is also that every time you have a turnover, you also have the chance to upgrade the unit. So the question really becomes, where is your best return on investment? What can you do with the cash flow that you're generating? Assuming that you have excess cash flow that you're able to reinvest, either buy more units or grow your business otherwise. And my observation is that most owners are very static. They just make the necessary repairs. So that's kind of what it is. They bought a property, maybe they made some initial repairs or upgrades in order to get it there, but from there on, it's very, very stable. And what you see typically is that this doesn't change until somebody buys that investment and then comes in with fresh capital and makes those upgrades. So we'll talk about this. Deals are not easy to come by at the moment. We just spoke about ultra low inventory. We just have a month worth of supply. So it's not easy to get a good deal on the contract. Um, I'm in the same boat as everybody else. So every property that I'm buying, I always have the feeling I paid too much. That seems to be a thing. Of course, interest rates are still elevated. We're seeing rates coming down, but that's A, not happening yet, and then B, it is not going to be that meaningful to really be a game changer. Maybe we'll see 25, 50 basis points lower mortgage rates. That is not going to really change the game. But we do have a very high demand for nice upgraded rental places. Milwaukee is an old city. We have a lot of old and rundown rental properties. And I think a lot of people are just looking at this and say, well, it's good enough. But when you engage with your tenants and you listen to the market and you see what's going on there, a lot of them wish actually that they would be able to rent nicer and more updated units. And a lot of them are actually willing and able to pay for that. So here's the idea. Upgrade your existing units at the next turnovers. Tenants are willing to pay more rent, but that's not the only thing. It's also that you are reinvesting money into your own asset. I think that's one of the beautiful things about real estate, that it's not like the stock market where somebody else is the CEO of the company and there's nothing you can do. You are the CEO of your business and you get to choose what you want to reinvest. So if you want to make your own assets better, that is perfectly within in your control. And any upgrade that you make will ultimately also increase the value of your asset, especially if you do it correctly. Long term, that's a really good return on investment. Um, Run some numbers. I was contemplating going through examples, but it varies a lot. But the bottom line is what you find is you'll get a really good return on investment, especially if you include soft expenses like lower turnover rates. So turnover is really one of the biggest expenses that we're dealing with. For my business, we're calculating that about $5,500, almost $6,000 is our average turnover cost. And that includes releasing expenses. That's, a month worth of rent right there. Because it's work time and effort. You have always a few repairs, you have always a few upgrades. Maybe it takes you a few weeks, so you have a gap there, you have a vacancy. So you tally it all up, and it becomes a very substantial amount very quickly. So in your case, it may be $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, it might be more, but turnover is a very big expense. So now what would happen to your business if you would go from having 20 turnovers every year to having 10 turnovers every year? How much money would that save you? How much operational expenses would that save you? That those things have a big impact. And when you look at tenant retention rates and why tenants are moving, a lot of times they are moving because they're not happy with the quality of the place where they're living, and they can afford something better, so they want it, and they're going and finding something better. Large investors do understand the power of asset repositioning. So that's a fancy term that's thrown around a lot. And you've seen it, you're familiar with it. It basically refers to buying a property, buying a multifamily, and going in and basically over the course of a year upgrading all of the units, which means you're positioning it differently on the market. You're appealing to a different set of tenants. So you can raise your rents, you can raise your net operating income, and on the tail end, ideally, you do a refinance of the whole thing and take the equity out that you have generated in this way. The interesting thing to me is that I rarely see it that somebody is doing that to their own property. So the properties are really, they're maintained, they're repaired, but they're basically slowly degrading and deteriorating until it gets to the point where the current owner is ready to sell it to a new owner, and the new owner is then typically going through that process of repositioning that asset. So there's no reason to leave that to somebody else. It's a very profitable business model, and you can totally do this on your own properties. So what should you upgrade? There are certain things that will give you a quicker and higher return on investment. I would really start with the exterior. Curb appeal goes such a long way and is really a big part of your lifestyle experience. So just think of, when tenants are coming home, when they're walking up to the property, is what are they seeing? Is the lawn kept? Are the bushes neat and trim? Is the grass overgrowing on the concrete? Is the parking lot all beat up and buckling and potholes? Yeah, it's good enough to use, and people can still park their cars there, but it doesn't really, as a tenant, it doesn't really make you happy that you live there. It creates just an overall feel of, not great. So start with the exterior. Then the next thing, obviously, are kitchens. You have to be careful with that. You have to do it on a budget, obviously, but it is really one of the biggest RO drivers, also with tenant happiness and tenant retention. And you don't have to go all out and put granite countertops in your kitchens. I see this on Bigger Pockets a lot. People say, yeah, you have to tenant-proof your units, and we put stone everywhere. What they say, not what I do. We actually operate in higher rent ranges. Our average rent is over $1,800, and we do not put stone countertops in any of our kitchens. We choose really nice laminate countertops, and my experience is they last just as well. And if I would ever have to replace one, which I can rarely think of 2 or 3 incidences where we got one damaged, it is relatively easy to do. So you can do kitchens on a budget. Bathroom upgrades are next. With bathrooms, I can tell you there is not really a way to do this on just halfway. It's every time I've tried to do that, it comes down to rip everything out, and including the drywall, and just replumb everything and start building it up from there. Flooring updates, of course, LVP flooring is our favorite. My tip is stay away from the really cheap stuff. We usually go for a medium grade quality. It sounds a lot better. It creates a much better feel, and it will probably also outlast the cheap stuff. Doors are one of my favorite upgrades. So a lot of rental properties have these very inexpensive hollow core doors. We routinely upgrade them to 6-panel solid pine doors, and then paint them white. So I think at Menards they're about $120 a slab. You can leave the door jambs in place. We just swap out the door slab itself, and then change the handle. You can even leave the hinges in there. It's all set up, so it's relatively easy to do, but it really elevates the whole look and feel of the entire property. Lighting and dimmers is another one. If you don't have good lighting, super easy upgrade and really elevates the whole experience. What I would advise you against is don't do any spot upgrades and then expect a big impact. So just because you change 2 light fixtures and replace the carpet in one room, the market will not give you substantially more in rent. You want to create a balanced appearance. So if you are upgrading a unit, then make sure you're consistent throughout that entire unit and elevate it uniformly. You don't want to spend a lot of money on a brand new kitchen and then have a really disgusting old bathroom, because that will not give you a good ROI. The market will not jump on that. You want to elevate it all about the same level, so you create a good and uniform lifestyle experience. That's really what people are willing to pay for. So those are all things that we were talking about, that are kind of cosmetic, visual, but there's also things that are a little bit more structural is not the right word, capital expenditure type items. And if you're not doing this on a regular basis, I would encourage you to take a look at your large CapEx items, make a list of all your properties, and take stock of the condition and the age of every single roof of every single parking lot. When you look at the roofs, for example, are they all, 5 years old, 10 years old, or are most of them 25 years old and really hanging on by the skin of their teeth? You really want to know these things because they're going to come up. And ideally, you know what your CapEx spending is going to be every year over the next 10 years. Roofs are such a good example, but there's other things. Of course, you have all the mechanicals, HVAC, electrical, plumbing. None of these things last forever. So yeah, you can, kick down the can a few more years and maintain it and spend some more money on repairs, but eventually you will have to deal with it. For example, I can tell you we're replacing 3 or 4 driveways every year. We started a few years ago, and we just ranked all the driveways from worst to best. And then we're starting on the bottom end, and every year we're strategically spending money and we're replacing a few of those driveways because they're not getting better. Most of them are 60 years old. So those are some things to think about, and being strategic and purposeful about how you're reinvesting money back into your properties. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah. With that, I'd like to open it up to some Q&A and see what you guys are thinking and how you're running your business. There's a lot of different ways how to do that. Jane would love to hear a little bit more about you, what you're doing. Sounds like you have found an unusual business model.
Hi, I am buying broken houses directly in my neighborhood and fixing them up. My husband is a union carpenter, and we bought our house that we live in on one of those credit transfer checks from Discover
Okay.
uh, for $11,364.34. And it is still the largest check I've ever written.
Wow.
Um, it was a foreclosure. We fixed it up, and there were a lot on my block, and we buy them. I bought one for $5,000. I bought the second one for 14. But I had a partner at that point, and he was not cut out for the rental being a landlord. So
Yeah.
I bought him out. But we buy broken and we fix it up. So we put in tile, we put in dishwashers, we refinish hardwood floors. And in the 10 plus years that I've been doing this, I've had 6 tenants. So my turnover is really low. Our current plan for the first one that I bought is it needs a new roof, but I'm putting on steel because 30 years ago, my dad put a steel roof on my home in North Dakota, and I've watched it age almost not even noticeably. So the plan is to steel roof all 3 homes. I have new siding on everything, so I'm good there. Front curb appeal, I put in Victory Gardens, and I let the tenants plant if they want. And if they don't, I do, and I let them harvest what they want. So I'm doing this in a weird way, and I know that, but I'm using the talents that we have. So
Yep. No, I think that's awesome. I don't think this is a weird way. I think you're doing that's the classic path. It's your numbers are extremely low, but there I think it is possible, as you can certainly attest to. Especially if you are personally very involved and very engaged. You can make it happen in every neighborhood. This may not be the perfect right path for everybody, but it sounds like you're having a really good success with that. So thank you for sharing.
you're welcome. And I live here. That was the other rule that I had when we thought about doing that, is I didn't want to be an absentee landlord because this neighborhood is plagued by them. And
Yeah. Are you in
so when,
Milwaukee?
like, I'm in Milwaukee, I'm in Sherman Park.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the problem children on my block are landlords who live outside of my neighborhood.
Yeah. And out of state usually.
Yeah, I've got one of those. And it's really hard because every police call has been because of absentee landlords renting to people that I'm not sure they've even met.
Yeah, I have quite a bit of interactions with out-of-state investors, and the issue is that oftentimes they are absolutely clueless what's really going on. And
Right.
when they, I sometimes get called in for, I don't do this anymore. I've got burned, but I get called in for, please help me. I'm stuck. I want to, ditch those properties, and my property manager can't rent them in 3 months. And I'm like, how is this possible? We get flooded with applications every time we put a property on the market.
Yeah.
And so I go there and look at the property. I'm like, you couldn't put an animal in there. This is not okay for human habitat. So,
Yeah.
and then we do a live call from there, and they just didn't know. They had no idea.
And that's the problem, I think. I don't know who's keeping it from them, but they often don't know. I mean, I called the guy on the corner 4 or 5 times because he had a family of raccoons living in his house with the tenant,
Yeah.
and he was not answering my messages or anything. And I was like, these poor people have raccoons pooping in their basement.
Yeah. I think
So
I think what
it's
happens many times is that the property manager is getting a lot of pressure from the owner to not spend any money.
yeah,
And so now they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. The owner doesn't want to fix anything, but at the same time, property looks like holy hell and is not taken care of. And yeah, it's just overall not a good situation. I love what you're doing, that you're there and you're hands on, and that's really the way to do it. That's awesome.
thanks.
I think we had a few other people that unmuted themselves before. Would love to hear some comments from you guys, some questions.
Hey, Marcus. I am wondering if anybody on the call has been experiencing, which we have been experiencing, late payments across the board, all kinds of hardships. We're putting together plans, like payment plans, but it was like all of a sudden in the last couple months. So I just don't know if it's a reflection of the economic times, with people are struggling with inflation and the economy, and they're just so hard pressed. What we're doing is payment plans and kind of breaking things up, just because we really like our tenants. But I just wanted to see if that was something anybody else has experienced. And then also, we just recently had our first bed bugs, and we took care of it. Again, from economic standpoint, they couldn't pay for it, and we didn't want it to continue. And so we did a full 2-day spray thing where they had to be gone for 3 hours, and it kind of cleared it up. So, we're happy with our tenants. We've done a good job of improving our units, but now we're just seeing really people struggling out there.
Thanks, Gina. Oh, your question was to the group. I would love to hear somebody else chime in. I have my personal perspective on this, but would wait until see if somebody else has to say something.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. You know what? I want to go back. I am what they call an absentee landlord, sort of. And I want to go back there because when I have a tenant move out, I actually move in to fix it and to make sure everything works and to check on my neighborhood and make sure that, in fact, I'm more of a neighborhood watch than my neighbors are. So I just wanted to point out that that's the landlord's fault, what was going on before. If you're a good landlord, you know what's going on. And in between tenants, I do all the cleanup, I upgrade, I check everything out, and I make sure that I know where that, house is going. So I just wanted to point out that not all landlords are the same. And to the current person who just was talking, I had to eject all of my tenants and tell my new tenants that if they don't pay the rent, they're not going to live there anymore. And guess what? 4 months later, all my tenants are paying their rent on the 1st. That's all I needed to say.
Thanks, Beck. Yeah, I think again, you're the opposite of a absentee landlord. I cannot think of a way to be more involved and actually move in and really get roll your sleeves up and get right into the middle of it. I think that's awesome. Anybody else having some thoughts on delinquencies lately? Experience?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
No. Like the other speaker said that she's experiencing a lot of late rents or people not paying their rent. And I think in the last month or two, I'm experiencing the same thing. And I have over 100 rentals. And I look at my rental sheet every morning and I look, oh my gosh. And
Also related, we have the landlord bootcamp coming up on Saturday, November 16th. Early bird pricing now. So if you have not done bootcamp, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. It's intense. You're in for a full day of knowledge from attorney Tristan Pettit. And I would also highly recommend spend the $50 and get the printed folder. I printed it on my printer here. I regretted that. Just get the book. And then of course we have RPA Con coming up in October 25th, 26th. This is going to be a 2-day event this year. If you were there last year, it was all Friday, so we want to open it up more to people that have a W-2 job. And we hope seeing you there either Friday or Saturday, maybe even both days. I think that's all I got for you. Thank you very much for joining in. Thank you for being a member of the RPA and supporting us. And we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you, Marcus.
Thanks, Alexander, for helping. Bye, Mike.